morning, everyone. Welcome back to Bodhi Tree Buddhism Community for Class 7 of our series on Buddhist psychology. My name's Matt Osborne. I am live streaming here from Taiwan in Taipei. And if you are joining me now for this live stream on Facebook, please just drop a little hello or drop something in the messages here that comes with Facebook so that I can see that you're joining me here online. I know you're out there, everyone. I know you're out there. So please just drop a little message, let me know that you're there, and take a comfy seat, have a glass of water nearby, and get ready for today's class. Okay, now, before we begin, we should start with our formal invocation. Okay, so I'd like you now to just join your palms, and then we are going to invoke the name of Shakyamuni Buddha 3 times in Chinese, just to formally begin the class for today. Namo Ben Shi Jia Mo Ni Fo. Namo Ben Shi Jia Mo Ni Fo. Namo Ben Shi Jia Mo Ni Fo. Okay. So, as I mentioned last week, originally this series on Buddhist psychology was going to run for 6 classes. And then what we'd do, as we have been doing for the past year, I guess, we'd take a couple of weeks off, and then we'll start with some other new class or new course coming up after that. But just due to my own situation here and present work, the jobs that I'm working on, and other things that are coming up in the near future, I thought it'd be better if we just kind of extend this one out a bit, and instead of doing just the 6 classes, I'm going to try to aim for 8 classes. So today's 7, and then next week we'll try to do 8, and then we'll maybe have a break and then start up with something else. Okay, I see we have Tin Mei Fang is tuning in. Nice to see you as always. Hope you are safe and well wherever you may be. So because the original plan was for 6 classes, and I kind of I don't know if you felt this way, I kind of, had the plan that by the time we get to the 6th class, we kind of wrap it all up. Kind of then, if you want to add another class or 2 afterwards, it's kind of a bit weird. Or I was thinking, what do I do in terms of content? Okay, so we've got a couple of other people joining us. We've got Suk E1. We've got GW. Good morning to you all. Good to see you. I'm glad that you have taken the opportunity to join us. Okay, so what did I do? I did something kind of a bit lazy on my part. So I dredged up some of my old PowerPoints that I had about the Abhidharma, which is very closely related to Buddhist psychology. And I've taken some selected parts out of that and molded them into my present PowerPoint, and that's what we're going to be using, at least for today and next week as well. So we're gonna, but I think this is quite good. Like I said, we kind of had wrapped up a bit by the end of week 6, but then this Abhidharma material is kind of going to take us a bit more depth, right? It's going to add some more depth into the way in which we think about the mind and the states of mind. So this week we're going to be talking about more of the underlying theory of the Abhidharma and how it talks about mental states. And then next week we will be looking at its really detailed analysis of different mental states and how they function together. So today is a little bit more philosophical, and next week will be a bit more analytical. But I hope all these coming together will also help to provide a lot more detail and depth to this big topic called Buddhist psychology. Okay, we've got a couple more people. We've got Eric, we've got Jay Lee. Good morning to you all. Hope you're all doing well this morning. Hope you are safe and well, and your families and friends and communities are all safe and well in these, what we can only call troubled times, I must admit. Okay, now let me switch on over to the PowerPoint and we can take it from there, shall we? Okay, so Buddhist Psychology, Class 7. Outlines of Abhidharma thought. This is our topic for this week. Okay, so the very first question is, what does Abhidharma mean? I think probably quite a few of you have heard of the Abhidharma. One of the reasons why I felt okay to use this material for the Bodhi tree classes. This is actually stuff that would come more out of a kind of a university level lecture. Why I thought it would work okay for Bodhi tree, which is far more practice oriented, is I think a lot of you already have like some grounding and some of the good basics of Buddhism. So this for you should be not like a huge leap from your present understanding. And probably many of you have heard of the Abhidharma. I remember when I first had a lot of interest in Buddhism and I kind of heard about the Abhidharma. I admit that people would often mention the Abhidharma and talk about it, but in English there wasn't that much kind of information about it, like just sort of short, clear and precise and easily understood information about it. So hopefully I can fill in a little bit of that gap today. So let's just talk about the word, because the word itself is important in understanding what the whole larger idea is. So first of all, we have this prefix abhi. I mean, when we look at the word Abhidharma, we think like, I know part of that, right? That looks like Dharma at the end. We know Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? We know this word. So we've got this prefix at the start, abhi. And that usually is understood to be direct or higher. Now these two things are like direct and higher are not really in English, but they're two different like meanings. And some places, if you look more at the Pali literature, people tend to emphasize higher. They'll usually, from Theravada traditions, about Abhidharma is like the higher teachings. But another sense of Abhi is direct or like facing. And we can see this in the Chinese translation. So when the great master Xuanzang, usually because he translated most of the Abhidharma texts that are found in Chinese now were translated by the master Xuanzang in the 7th century. Normally he'd transliterated Abhidharma. He didn't translate it at all. He just kept it. It's like us writing Sanskrit. We don't translate it. We just write Abhidharma. But when he did translate it, and he did every now and then, he'd translate it as Dui Fa. Dui means, it's the same Dui as in like, Dui Bu Dui, as in like, is that correct? But normally it doesn't mean that. Dui means facing something or directly. Like, if you imagine like, I am now Dui this video camera, for example, or I'm Dui this screen in front of me. I'm like facing it directly. So that's kind of directly facing. And then in the Pali traditions, as I just mentioned, they'll often talk about Abhi as meaning higher, kind of supreme or better form of something. Now the word Dharma is even more tricky, because we know the word Dharma is like multivalent. It's got a lot of meanings, and you can kind of connect those meanings together. They're kind of related, but they don't just mean the same thing. They're distinct kind of ideas or concepts. So one of the first ones, of course, for Dharma is the truth realized by the Buddha. So we might say something like, the Buddha realized the Dharma. Now, it's a fairly common kind of expression, right? So then what do we mean by Dharma? Often like the truth. There is a term in Pali and Sanskrit, and dharmata, which is kind of an abstract. The ta at the end is an abstract sense. So it kind of means like the nature of things. The way of things. This is why it often gets translated like truth, but also like the law of Dharma, like this natural law that governs the universe. And so that's what the Buddhas and other awakened practitioners, that's what they realize, that's what they understand. That's what makes them Buddhas. But we also have the sense of Dharma as meaning the truths, the teachings that lead to that truth. So we also have like the Buddha teaches the Dharma. So if you talk about like the first meaning of like Dharma is like, the laws and the rules by which the universe functions, when the Buddha teaches those, then we have these expressions that kind of point towards that. So we can kind of look at these two. If I can use like a the Chan school expression. Well, it's not just the Chan school. Like the finger pointing at the moon, right? So the moon is like the truth, and the finger that points at the moon is, of course, then the teachings, right? It's the words, the teachings, the expressions are not reality itself, but they're directing us to look at that reality. So Dharma can mean this too. And it can also refer to the fundamental phenomena that make up the world. So not just like the principles by which the world, or the principle by which the world functions. And that's the first two senses, the truth and the teachings. A lot of the time they're in the singular, the dharma. Sometimes the teachings can be plural. But when it comes to this third point, like the various phenomena that the world is composed of or constructed out of, this is usually in the plural. So when we talk about, if I use like a modern physics expression, like the various atoms from which our bodies and the planet and the universe is made, like those atoms are kind of like one category of these fundamental phenomena from which the world is composed. So that's a bit of a different sense. The relationship between the truth and the teachings, I think, is easier to see. Like there's reality, and then there's teachings or instructions that direct us towards understanding that reality. Some of these phenomena, I mean, you can kind of say, well, maybe the phenomena that make up the world are part of the truth which is realized by the Buddha. Yeah, maybe. But it is a distinct idea. So when we put these two together, Abhi and Dharma, and we get this word Abhidharma, what do we get? Well, we get a number of possibilities, right? Because we've got different meanings for both Abhi and also for Dharma. So these different combinations. We can have Abhidharma as higher teachings. And as I said, in the Pali Theravadan tradition, this is kind of stock standard. Abhidharma. What's Abhidharma? It's the higher teachings. And yeah, okay. Then teachings that the Buddha supposedly gave, or the texts in which these teachings are written down, are the Abhidharma. And I think for most people, when they first hear of the Abhidharma, they hear it being referred to like a body of literature. Like it's like, there's these sutras, and then these, which are instructions from the Buddha, and then there's the Vinaya, which is the Buddha's teachings for monastic rules and discipline, and then there's the Abhidharma, which is his other higher teachings. And that also fits into the usual idea that we have of the three baskets, right? The three Pitaka: Sutra, Vinaya, well, depends on the order, different from Vinaya, Sutra, and Abhidharma. Now, I'm not going to go off topic and start talking about these. I know most people will talk about the three baskets. Buddhist teachings classified into three baskets. You've got to know, not all Buddhist schools had three baskets. Some had two, some had three, some had four, and some had five. And nowadays, this idea that like all schools talk about three, and this is some like universal Buddhist position, it's not historically accurate. Anyway, for some schools, one of those baskets is Abhidharma, so it's a category of teachings. But that's only one sense and one possible combination of Abhi and Dharma. We can also combine the sense of direct and phenomena. Abhidharma is kind of directly seeing phenomena, or being face to face with phenomena. Now that's quite different, right? That's talking about Abhidharma then as like a kind of like a state of mind, a state of understanding, a state of cognition, and not a body of literature. In that case, we might have Abhidharma is itself directly seeing or directly understanding the phenomena that make up the world, or, of course, directly seeing the truth. And then we can also then talk about teachings that would lead to directly seeing the truth, teachings that would directly lead to directly seeing phenomena, right? So you've got these multiple kind of levels and combinations of what is meant then by Abhidharma. In a way, Abhidharma is Dharma theory. It's, when we talked about Abhi as direct facing, we can say it's all about Dharma. That's another really basic meaning. Abhidharma is about the Dharma. What about the Dharma? Anything about the Dharma. It's Dharma theory. It's a theory about what these phenomena are, and also, of course, what the truth is. And so Abhidharma is not just the name of a textual genre. Or we can say there's this textual genre, there's these various teachings. Of course, even those are not originally textual, they are probably originally oral teachings. These oral teachings later get written down, but they're just fingers pointing at the moon. And the moon is trying to have this understanding, direct, face-to-face, direct realization of the truth, direct realization of the phenomena that make up the world. Okay, how are we going so far there, people? I'm going to tune back to Facebook and see who's tuning in there. Okay, I see we've got Terry joining us as well. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Okay, now just remember, as we're going, if you've got any questions, throw your questions out there. As I said, this is kind of a bit more, today's material and next week's is a bit more like kind of a lecture stuff. But I think for most of you, from my interaction with you from previous classes, I think this is maybe actually what you need. Some of the earlier stuff might be a little bit too basic. So hopefully this will kind of provide you with some other more depth and more detail. Okay, back to our notes, shall we? Okay, so with that in mind, with an understanding of what this word Abhidharma means, we can then talk about what's the aim of this Abhidharma methodology. So putting it together, and this is kind of paraphrasing actually some statements from the Abhidharma literature. It's to directly know phenomena, to directly know phenomena means to directly know reality, and this knowledge of reality is pure knowledge. So to directly know phenomena is abhisamaya. So abhi, you can see this directly, face to face, and that is to know reality. So here dharma is reality, kind of in the singular, like in English, reality or the truth. And we are abhidharma. We are directly face to face with that truth. And if we are, according to this particular tradition, if we want to directly know the truth or directly know reality, we need to know phenomena. These two things go together. And this understanding is like pure knowledge. And by pure knowledge, we can see here there's amala prajna. We know this word prajna, knowledge or wisdom. Of course, prajna is, in its highest sense, the knowledge that can cut through our ignorance. And by cutting through ignorance, it can also cut through our other afflictions, craving, aversion, jealousy, pride. Because when we really see things for what they are, for example, it also means we see that there is no ego, there is no self. What's the basis then for craving, for aversion, for jealousy, for pride, for arrogance, etc., etc.? The basis from that, which is in particular the sense of self and identity, is cut away. So Abhidharma in this sense, it gets really right down to the heart of Buddhist practice and the development of this knowledge, or we could say wisdom. Abhidharma knowledge, therefore, prajna or abhisamaya, is thus the means and key to liberation. So normally in Buddhism, traditionally, we might have this kind of morality, concentration to knowledge, then leads to liberation, right? So morality, ethics, shila, concentration, samadhi, knowledge, prajna, that's the path itself, right? These are things you cultivate. And usually it's kind of a progressive thing. You need the foundation in shila, your ethics and morality, in order to have some depth to your samadhi meditation. And then you need some depth to your samadhi meditation in order to see things clearly, which is the knowledge. These are all things you cultivate. The liberation is kind of then the culminating result. You don't develop liberation, but if you develop the first three elements of the path, then liberation is then the fruit of the path. That's kind of the standard approach. And we can see then how this idea of Abhidharma and understanding then fits in. That's the key thing that leads to liberation. And therefore, in these traditions, it was essential to know the various Dharma classifications as found in these Abhidharma teachings. And by Dharma classifications, it means being able to classify phenomena and know what phenomena there are, what are their characteristics, what are their qualities. There are some phenomena that are mental phenomena, some are physical phenomena, some are neither mental nor physical. Some phenomena are ones that are conducive towards happiness and conducive towards liberation. Some are hindrances towards happiness and liberation. And so part of this genre of teachings was to make these classifications. And then if we understand those classifications in the teachings, when we're experiencing, seeing, coming into contact, coming into cognition with these things, we know how to respond. Right? We know, hey, this thing's dangerous. This mental state is dangerous. Got to be careful. Or this mental state is actually a really good one. I need to develop that further. That's going to help me. So I think what happens when I read a lot of like Theravada material on the Abhidharma, there's kind of like this idea of like, oh, Abhidharma is just all these lists of different phenomena. And some of those texts, the early Abhidharma texts, were a bit like that. And one of the earliest English translations back in the days of the Pali Text Society in the 19th century, one of the translators, I can't remember who, it might have been Caroline Rhys Davis, I might be wrong. Anyway, she described these teachings as like a dry valley of bones. It's like, you imagine, you're stuck in the desert, and the desert of samsara, and the sun's beating down. You come up over a ridge and you look down into a valley, and you're hoping to see like an oasis or something, and instead you just see the bones of dead camels and people that have gone before you, and you're like, it's even worse. People come here to die. This is how they describe like these teachings. That's pretty brutal. I think one of the reasons is you do need quite a bit of a foundation in Buddhism. And you also, I think, really do need to be doing some kind of meditative practice, because when you do, you really do see all the different things that are going on in your mind, and you have a way to then understand it. It's the same for anything. If we want to understand something, we kind of need some kind of framework to organize that material in. And once we start to make a framework and organize it, things become much clearer. And so if you're not doing that practice and you don't have that time when you are being self-reflective, then it's just a bunch of lists. It would be like if you're memorizing things about the periodic table, but you're never doing a chemistry experiment. It'd be like it'd feel so dry and like abstract and disconnected from any reality. Okay, so we've been talking about then Dharma, the Abhidharma as Dharmas. So what then do we mean by this? I think we need a bit more detail. I'm going to come back to our main screen. No comments so far. Okay, as I said, if you've got any comments, feel free to throw them in. I hope you don't feel like you are walking in a desert and you have stumbled across a valley of dried bones. So then what do we mean by these dharmas, these phenomena that make up the world? Okay, now we're going to get a bit more philosophical here, okay? So the Abhidharma takes the different phenomena as described in the suttas, and it analyzes them. It also organizes them as well. I mean, if you've ever sat down and pulled out like a copy of, say, the Majjhima Nikaya or the Digha Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, and Anguttara Nikaya, these early Buddhist teachings, most of them are not that long, and so when you get these big texts that are like 500, 800, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 pages long, those have literally hundreds of, if not over 1,000, individual teachings of the Buddha. And often the Buddha is talking to this person and he's talking about all these phenomena. He's talking to this person, talking about all these phenomena. Some other teaching, of course, the Buddha is just maybe telling a story. It's not really talking about phenomena, it's just like some story. And so you've got, throughout all these different texts, you've got all these different descriptions of things, but each of those descriptions were, 99% of the time, just the Buddha responding to this particular person in this particular circumstance. And the Buddha not trying to give like this, okay, I'm now going to present to you the overarching system of everything. It would be like, if I can use the kind of periodic table example, it's like you're doing an experiment with, some salt, copper sulfate, and I don't know, something else, calcium chloride, just salt. And you're talking about that. So you're just talking about like four or five different things. You've got copper, you've got sulfur, you've got oxygen and a sulfate compound, you've got sodium and you've got chloride, they're in another compound. You put them in water, it's an aqueous solution, they become different ions, some are positive, some are minus, they interact in different ways. It's only talking about a handful of things, they're not talking about your entire periodic table. And so the suttas are a bit like that. Some suttas might repeat the same things. Certain ideas or certain phenomena might get mentioned many times. Things like samadhi, things like wisdom, things like faith, these kinds of things mentioned many times. Mindfulness. Other things might be mentioned very few times. And so the Abhidharma, after the Buddha's time, some people went through like, let's go through the whole canon and try to get these things and see if we put them all together, like, what do we have? Lots of them will be duplicated, so we'll need to kind of recognize that they're duplicated. Some things are kind of unique. Some things sound really similar, terms that are almost synonyms. Are they synonyms for the same thing, or are they actually distinct and different things? This is a very big question. So phenomena were classified in two ways, basically. Some things were irreducible ultimate realities, and other ones were things that were reducible into constituents and thus only designated. Again, now this is a big topic, so I'm only going to talk about this very simply. Imagine like this. Let's talk about the reducibles, the designated things. If I say like this table, I've got my laptop set up on a little like table. It's got like this kind of, don't even know what that is, some maybe a plastic kind of flat surface. It's got this light aluminium facing around it. And then it's got these like aluminium like legs, and then it's got little rubber bits on the legs. It's got a couple of like screws holding the legs on. Okay. So this table can be reduced, can be broken down. There's the tabletop. It's got this like light green surface. We've got this aluminium edging. We've got different screws. We've got two types of screws. We've got the legs, and we've got these rubber bits on the feet, on the legs. So that's a reducible thing. That's not an ultimate thing. There's no ultimate thing called the table. But we might say there's the table's top. That's a thing. There's the aluminium edging, the screws, the legs, the rubber. Those are irreducible ultimate realities. Now, of course, in my example, there's a metaphor, not a real example. In my example, of course, the tabletop can be further broken down. So can the aluminium, so can the rubber, right? Again, to use the chemical analogy, the aluminium's aluminium, right? That's Al. The top might be some other kind of, might be some kind of carbon compound. The rubber, that's kind of carbon compound. So you could break them down into different atoms. So in this system, there were certain things that were just basic elements, and then there were other things that were composites of a number of basic elements. And the key point here is that dharmas are really only the first ones, the irreducibles, things that cannot be further broken down. And so these ultimate realities, these ultimate parts, are further categorized into physical versus mind or mental. So my example of a table, even if we were to say the aluminium is irreducible, that's a mental, it's not mental at all. That's a physical phenomena. But then maybe something else like, today I'm in a good mood, I feel happy, so I have this There's Vedana, remember this word Vedana, the second aggregate, sensation or a feeling of happiness. That's a mental phenomenon. We can also classify them as defiled versus pure. If I'm angry, that's a defiled mental phenomena. If I am concentrated on a wholesome object, that is pure mental phenomena. Also, a big distinction is conditioned versus unconditioned. Basically, apart from, now this depends on different schools, basically apart from nirvana itself, everything else is conditioned. Everything else is dependent on other things, subject to change. Okay. Now that's a real like simple description of what we mean by dharmas as phenomena here. I could talk about this for weeks, to be honest, but that's just a simple thing. But you can already start to see that we can have this first breakdown. If you can break something down into constituent parts, then it's actually not a phenomena in the strict sense. It's a composite. And we can talk about composites, but just as what we call designation. So I can talk about a table. I have the word table, and if I say table, we can understand what it means, but there's no thing called table. There's actually a bunch of different things coming together called a cat table. But there are, according to the Abhidharma system, certain things that can be broken down. And it's really important that we do break things down. And one of the reasons is simply that the classic example is ourselves. I think of me, I think Matt, there is this person called Matt. And here is Matt. And so I think that there really is this Matt self-view, right? Boom, there's this ego, sense of self right there. But if I break that down, I realize, well, is Matt then the physical body? Or is it like my feelings? Or is it my thoughts? Or is it my emotions? Right, so I'm just using classic analytical breakdown by the 5 aggregates. I realize that like, well, the body like kind of is me, but then it's kind of not. Because I also know that like my body's always changing. You know, if I cut my fingernails off, does that mean Matt is now smaller? If I cut my hair, if I lose my hair, does that mean Matt is now somehow less? Are all those bits of scattered hair and fingernails me scattered everywhere? Like, suddenly we think that they're not. So if that's the case, we can't really say that the physical body is just equal to Matt. Likewise for all these other things. Just a regular breakdown analysis to eliminate the sense of self. But I can still talk about myself as a designation, but I can't cling to it as a really hard existing thing. So that's the classic kind of reason why this whole distinction between irreducible phenomena and composite designations came about. Okay, how are we going so far? Are you still with me, everyone? No response? And as usual, my kind of little Facebook display doesn't tell me how many people are online at the moment. At least we're not crashing like last week. Okay, let's continue. So when we're talking about, say, ultimate dharmas here means irreducible things. Okay, ultimate here is not in the sense of like ultimately good or like ultimately awesome. It just means things that can't be broken down. So when we talk about these things, we talk about their characteristics, their lakshana. And the lakshana are those things by which we know phenomena. It's kind of like an epistemological aspect. Epistemological just means in terms of knowing something, cognizing something. And then each dharma has its own specific and unique characteristics. It's svalakshana. So for example, material form obstructs and occupies space. So material things, they take up room, they take up some kind of space. And at least by the Abhidharma sense, the space that they take up, they kind of obstruct other things from being in that same space. You can't have two physical things that occupy the same space at the same time. That's the basic definition. Now you might say, well, what about air. Now this kind of probably didn't occur to the Abhidhamma people, but even then, to be honest, when you move your hand through the air does actually move out the way of your hand. It doesn't mean that your hand goes through the air itself. Your hand goes through space, but your hand does not go through the air, right? So you have to be careful about that distinction. Or, for example, mind or consciousness, its specific and unique characteristic is that it knows, it cognizes. Mind is that which cognizes. So these are kind of the basic definitions of things. And so all these irreducible parts, we could, for example, use this to look at the 5 aggregates. Vedana. Vedana is that which feels and experiences things. None of the other dharmas do that. The physical body does not experience. Thoughts like concepts do not experience. Even cognition itself or emotions do not experience. Experiencing is that unique characteristic of Vedana. Right? And likewise, we could say the same for like samjna, perceptions or conceptions. Conceptions don't feel. Conceptions conceive. Now, this kind of might sound a bit like kind of tautological, and when you look at these texts, they're kind of a bit like that. What are feelings? Feelings are those which feel. What are perceptions? Perceptions are those which perceive. You think like you're not really telling me anything here, but it is actually quite important because we often just mash all these things together. For example, when we perceive something and then we have some feeling and then we have some thought about it and we have some emotional response, a lot of people are unable to differentiate those things. And that's why they do things like they cannot separate the phenomena from the feeling about the phenomena. And they think that the feeling of being pleasant or unpleasant is inherent in the thing itself. They think ice cream is inherently good. It feels good. No, these are two different things. Ice cream, well, not even two things. Ice cream, perception of ice cream, feeling from ice cream, concept about ice cream. They're all distinct things. Because they often come together in clusters, we just lump them together as one thing, the whole big ice cream experience. But if we are using this approach and we're looking at our minds on a really microscopic level, then we see that no, these are distinct and separate things. So each dharma then has its own specific or unique characteristic, and that's also related to the idea that they can't be reduced. If there are different phenomena that had the same characteristic, they would effectively just be the same phenomena. But also groups of phenomena have what we can call common characteristics. So, for example, all conditioned phenomena are dissatisfactory, and all conditioned phenomena are also impermanent. Or we could say like all mental phenomena are non-physical. They share that, but just because ideas and emotions and perceptions are non-material, it doesn't mean that ideas, perceptions, and emotions are therefore the same thing. It's just like also if we say for material matter, just because this table and this cup and this microphone all occupy space, it doesn't mean this cup and this table and this microphone are therefore the same thing. But we can group them together as well. And that can also be useful for then understanding things as classes of phenomena. And we're going to see this concept later in particular when we classify phenomena. So mental phenomena, there are a range of different phenomena that are unique and specific, but they might all be wholesome, for example. They're different from each other, but they all have a kind of a shared characteristic of being wholesome or afflictions or something like that. So those classifications, kind of groups, are also important to know. Or another one, of course, groups of phenomena and their common characteristics, all phenomena are not self. So we can apply these two, for example, to, all things, be they physical or mental. All physical phenomena dissatisfactory, not impermanent, not self. All mental phenomena, also dissatisfactory, impermanent, and not self as well. Okay. So understanding the unique, specific characteristics of different things, and also grouping them under their common characteristics. And then one last thing in this area, ultimate dharmas and their nature. So characteristics is in terms of how we know them. Their nature is more of a kind of a ontological thing, like how do they exist? Now this one in particular, a number of Buddhist schools just really didn't buy into this aspect of Abhidharma. And the whole idea that things are ultimately irreducible, many Buddhist schools, and particularly the Mahayana schools, did not buy into this. They would just still say, look, even if you think that you've analyzed something down to like an irreducible thing, like feelings or perceptions, actually they can always be analyzed further. And if you analyze them to a certain point, you'll actually find that you don't get anything at all. So when we talk about the conceptions or feelings or emotions, they're actually all just designations. They don't really exist as those things in and of themselves. Now that's kind of a bit of a different issue. That's if we get into, say, like a bit of Madhyamaka or even Yogacara philosophy. But I think at this point, and for what we're trying to do here for Buddhist psychology, let's just take this idea, not hold it too high, but let's just take this idea because it's still very valuable. I think a lot of people make this mistake, particularly if they're into Mahayana traditions. And Mahayana traditions, all phenomena are empty. They have no inherent existence. And therefore they think, well, okay, well, all this system of understanding all these different mental states of mind, I don't need to know that because I just know that they're all ultimately non-existing and ultimately empty. Well, in a way, if we could really understand the fact that things are all ultimately empty and non-existent in the way in which we perceive them, then yeah, we would have true wisdom and we would be able to remove our afflictions. The problem is, having that understanding itself, that prajna, is partly dependent on having samadhi, and that samadhi is also partly dependent on having good ethics. And these kinds of things, if we really want to have those qualities, if you really want to have good meditative concentration, knowing all these different states of mind is very, very valuable. So we have to be careful and avoid this trap of thinking, oh, just because everything's ultimately empty, therefore we don't need to know about them. We just empty, ma'am, empty. No, that is not the Mahayana path. The Mahayana path involves both. You need to understand things in their conventional sense and also in their ultimate sense. I'm getting a bit off topic here, but this is a key point. So by this Abhidharma system, so all these phenomena have their own specific and unique nature. Sometimes it's synonymous with their characteristics and these other terms. And as I've just said, this got a lot of criticism from other Buddhist schools, mostly because the other schools would say, if you think that there are ultimately irreducible phenomena that have their own specific nature, then isn't that just the same as saying that they're like a self? The idea of a self is like some unique, indivisible self-entity. You're just saying then that all the phenomena that make up the world are themselves just individual, unique, little mini micro identities. Okay, and this is a big debate between the Madhyamaka and the Abhidharma people. We're going to skip that for now. Like I said, the most important thing at this point is to say, let's not worry about the ultimate nature, but the idea that we can still take all these phenomena of the world, mental phenomena, physical phenomena, and try to classify them and try to understand them is very valuable. It's very valuable. Not just to like our meditative practice, but also in terms of understanding how things work. And part of wisdom or part of prajna is also understanding like the relationships between things, understanding dependent origination. Dependent origination principle is when you have these different things together, they function in such a way that they bring about some other phenomena, right? Classic example, when you've got good ethics and you start to develop your mind in this way, you can bring about this state which we call concentration or samadhi. There's a causal relationship going on. You need to bring about certain conditions, right? You want to have samadhi, well, you need good ethics. You probably need to have some kind of good location to practice. When you're practicing, you'll have to look after your physical health and your food and your sleep. You'll have to make sure that your environment is suitable. These are various conditions that then bring about a result of a concentrated mind. Now, we could just say, well, they're all just empty. What you eat and how you sleep is all just empty, so it doesn't matter. That attitude will not get you samadhi itself. And then our understanding of emptiness will just be this concept and these words, everything's empty, and not like an actual understanding. So we still need to know how things function on this basic level, and that includes all these little micro things that make up the world, the physical world, and most importantly, the mental world. What are all those different mental states that are going on? Really important. Now, one last point for today about these phenomena is the question of momentariness. So I'm going to zip back to Facebook, see what's going on over there. Okay, we've got Henry who's joining us. Nice to see you, Henry. I'm not sure if this is your first time, but if it is or it isn't, welcome along. Okay, no other comments from anyone else so far. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so another really important point here and concept in Abhidharma is this idea of momentariness. We've already talked right back here, right? Let me zip back a page or two. Right, grouping of phenomena, like all conditioned phenomena are dissatisfactory and impermanent, all phenomena are not self. Right, these so-called the Dharma seals, right? The Dharma seals. Really key concepts and also really important as what we talk about like wisdom. One of the aspects of Buddhist wisdom is really understanding the dissatisfactory nature of things and the impermanent nature of conditioned things. It's super important. So, flipping through here quickly, let's talk about momentariness. So, in early Buddhism, we have this kind of concept, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, sarva samskara anitya. Pretty straightforward, right? All conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and pretty much anything that we come into contact with in regular terms falls into the category of conditioned phenomena. And in order to kind of really like understand this and sharpen up this concept of impermanence, the Abhidharma systems establish this idea that dharmas, phenomena, are momentary, ksanika. So momentary, what does this mean? So we've got this idea of like a moment. And a moment is effectively like an irreducible unit of time. So just as when we're talking about the phenomena that make up the world, the Abhidharma believe that there are certain things that could be like designations, like a table, even a person. But if you analyze them down, you get to irreducible parts. So my table ends up as some kind of carbon compound, some aluminium stuff, and some other rubber carbon compound. Okay, kind of like that. And the so-called person gets reduced down to 5 aggregates. There's a physical body, there are feeling sensations, there are perception conceptions, there are emotions and driving forces, and then there's cognition itself. In the Abhidharma system, they say there's no person in the ultimate sense, but these 5 things really do exist. So this idea of momentariness and a ksana was a similar kind of analysis, but on the temporal level. So you could say like, oh, there's a year, there's a month, there's a week, there's a day. These are all units of time, but they can all be broken down into smaller parts, right? Years can be broken down into months, months into days or weeks. Days can be broken into hours, hours into minutes, minutes into seconds. Now I know in modern sciences, of course, well, actually it's a good question. It's a really good question. Normally we would think, well, surely you could just break it down, just move the decimal point one place to the left, and you've broken it down by a factor of 10, and you can do that ad infinitum, right? In terms of maths, you can always make something smaller. I don't know if that actually does work on the level of physics where, no, it's taking me off on a different track, where like the very definition of time, as I understand it, if you're a physicist, correct me, is like measured in terms of like the decay rate of some like cesium atom or something. And I think because the way in which they decay, it's either a case of it's decayed or it's not decayed. So does that mean time by that definition is actually still in units? I don't know. But one very interesting thing, but anyway, in the Abhidharma system, they really believe there was a shortest unit of time. And the different phenomena all just existed within that one unit of time. Now, this idea that like time could be measured in individual units, it kind of sounds like, I think, oh, that's strange. Is time really can be broken down into indivisible units? Until, it was a while ago now, there's one of many good studies talking about Buddhist thought and contemporary neuroscience. And the fact is that apparently, if I remember correctly, the way in which the mind works, like the mind kind of, in terms of its perception of things, it works like on cycles. And so they could kind of do experiments whereby basically getting the timing of the mind's cognitive cycles, they could make an object, if they could combine the appearance of the object with the cycle, then the object would appear. But they could actually make it like the cognition and then flash of the object, and the cognition and then the flash. They could get them off sync, whereby the mind actually would not perceive the object because it was out of sync. So it made me think and part of the argument of that paper was, let's not look at this in terms of like things existing in like irreducible units of time, but in terms of like how things exist, but in terms of our perception of phenomena. Our perceptions are not just this constant, ongoing, without a break thing. They are literally moments of perception, just simply because the ways in which these things, perceptions, like work in the brain through some like, I don't know if it's firing of synapses or some kind of brain wave cycles or something like that. And so perception as a subjective act does work on, it does come down to like this irreducible moment of perception. That is a really profound concept. And this is also something we constantly got to be aware of. Like, we can talk about how things exist out there, but in terms of we as human beings, what's often far more important is how do we experience things, not how are things in the subjective sense. It's a big philosophical question itself, but I hope you get the point I'm making. So these dharmas were then momentary. So as a moment, it was an irreducible moment of time, or we can say, like I just said now, there are irreducible moments of perception. Now, time itself is not a dharma. Time itself is not a thing. We only have a sense of time because things change, and then we reflect on what things were before and what they are now. We perceive change, and therefore we create this concept of time. But in Buddhist terms, time is not a thing. It's a very powerful idea. Remember, one of my teachers at Hong Kong, Professor Karuna Dasa, in a class a bit similar to this, he just turns to us one day and says, "Time does not exist." And we're all like, "Huh?" And then he explained this, and we kind of mind blown. Okay, that brings us up to the end here. Next week, this is for next week, we're going to talk about the mental factors. We're going to talk about all these classifications of different phenomena. Today has been pretty heavily philosophical. I know. I make no apologies for that. Some of these ideas I think are really interesting, the way in which we understand these things. And then it is possible to bring these kinds of ideas into the meditation cushion. So in a second, I'm going to jump up. Hopefully you're going to jump up too. We're going to do some stretches, and we're going to have our usual sitting meditation for the day. And what I want you to think about then, as we're meditating, is like, just as you're sitting there, we're going to use our usual breath meditation, but your mind's doing all this other stuff as well. And I want you to just reflect very generally and very broadly on the mind. See its nature, see how the mind works, see the differences between mental experiences and physical experiences. Reflect for a moment on often the things that we think about are often composite phenomena, and not kind of, is it possible to kind of take that composite experience and reduce it down and break it down? And then what are the different parts that make up that composite experience? And how does it occur to us in terms of time? So how does it in terms of change and that impermanent changing nature of experience? And I think meditation is one of the best places to see just how fluid the mind is and fluid experiences are. You can be one moment, oh, here I am, physical body sitting on the floor, and the next your mind is, figuratively speaking, in like another planet, right? That movement, that change, how different types of states of mind lead to some very different experiences. And ultimately, of course, those experiences are what our lives are. Strings of experience. So, I know that's some pretty big and broad stuff, but I thought today might be fun to have a little more in-depth look at some of this Abhidharma philosophy, and next week we'll be continuing on with the different classifications of the mind and mental phenomena in Abhidharma. Okay. It's a couple of minutes to 10, so I think it's time to get up and do some stretches, huh? Get our butts off our cushions. Okay, I need to move the camera here. Okay, let's just do our usual run. I just need to adjust that camera. I'm sorry, that should be up higher. Very unprofessional of me, isn't it? Okay. So let's just do our usual from our key joints, ankles, knees, hips, stretching the spine, also the neck and shoulders, and that's going to get us ready for our usual sitting session. So let's get our mindfulness into the body, into the right ankle. Feel that movement. Right, you've got a physical body, and then you've got this physical cognition back the other way. You can feel touch. You can feel movement. You might have pleasant or unpleasant sensations. Change foot. Right, you got touch, literally the body coming into contact with another physical object. And then we have this physical cognition. There are different sensations. You might have some concept. You might, oh, that hurts. Remember that's an idea. The thought that hurts and the actual pain are two distinct things. Okay, onto the knees. Hands on the knees. Just do little circles first. Back the other way. Okay, together. I'm just going to squat down. Back, down, back, down. Last one. Wow, my knees are really popping today. And up. Okay, feet apart, hands on your hips. I'm going to do circles. Getting off center with the camera. Again, you're having a physical cognition, right? You've just literally, your body, you are aware of your body, and then there might be painful or neutral or pleasant sensations. There might be a perception. You might think, oh, I hurt my back, or I need to exercise more, right? These are concepts. It's your third aggregate. You might have an emotion. You might go, I can't, stop. You know, that might be like an emotion of aversion against like a painful experience. Right? That's your fourth aggregate. Okay, let's do some. Let's just shake out our legs. Okay, now we're going to do the spine, and of course this is going to stretch the spine. It's going to open our chest, and we're also going to breathe, coordinating. Remember, if you stretch up or back, inhale, because that's opening your chest. If you're going forward or down, we're going to exhale, because it's going to help to pull the diaphragm in and contract. Okay. So hands together, inhaling, stretching up. So I have to stand on the side because on this tatami is a very low roof. Exhaling down. Inhaling up. Exhaling down. Inhaling up. Exhaling down. Inhaling up. And relax. Okay, feet apart. Right arm up. Inhale. Over to the left. Stretching the right side of the body. Again, you're feeling the body. That is a cognition. And your body, you might have a sensation, pleasant or unpleasant, neutral, coming up, breathing in, changing, over to the other side. You might have some perception, some thought or idea about that. That's the third aggregate. You might have an emotional response. That's your fourth aggregate. Breathing in, change, exhale, breathing in, over. So we can do this kind of analysis, not just when we're sitting. We can do this all the time. Up. One more set. Okay, last set we'll just do the head, so just stretching up and down, up and down, up and down, middle, left, right, left, and right, left, and right. Okay, time to flip on over, change the camera, and get ready for our sitting session for the day. Okay. Take your seat, how it's going to make you comfortable. If you want to go half lotus, full lotus, you want to do kneeling. If you're sitting on a seat with your feet down, that's all good. I think that camera might need to go up a bit. Oh, no, not the best to play around with that right now. Okay, you can stretch forward and then to the sides if you need to. Always good to get comfy before you begin. Okay, it's a couple of minutes after 10, so we can have a slightly longer, decent length of a session today, I hope. Okay. Glasses and other things, if you need to take them off and put them on the side. Just keep mine on so I can keep a track of the time. Start with a couple of deep full breaths. Breathing nice, slowly and deeply. And exhaling all the way out. Just mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Using that statement to direct our attention towards the breath. If the mind wanders, just acknowledge that and then bring it back to the breath. Can be aware as we're breathing in, if it's a long inhalation or short inhalation, and as we're breathing out, you can be aware if it's a long exhalation or a short exhalation. Don't have to control it, we're just being aware of the breath in order to settle our mindfulness on the breath, rather than letting the mind wander. breathing in and mindfully breathing out. You don't need to worry about future or past, just this very present breath right now. It's all we have to worry about. Mindfully breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, experiencing the whole body. breathing in, relaxing the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the whole body. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. If the mind wanders or is distracted, just acknowledge that and bring it back to the breath. breath in. Slowly exhale all the way out. Just rock your body left and right. Bring your attention back to the body and movement. You can roll your shoulders. Open up your hands, stretch your hands. Warm up your palms. Cover your eyes. Massage around the eyes and those vital points around the eye socket, forehead, temples, cheeks, to the jaw, back of the head, neck. You can massage your ears, particularly down to your earlobes. Shoulders and arms. The chest and abdomen. And your lower back. Okay. I'm going to do the waist, lower back and hips. Breathe in, stretch forward. Breathing out, you go to the left, center, and right. Center, back to the middle. You can unfold your legs, and if you need to, you can do some stretches. You can do a pat down or do your ankles or what have you, whatever you need there. Okay, I'm going to just move forward and adjust the camera once again. I need some little like device that I can put my camera on remote and pop out. That would be very nice, wouldn't it? Okay, a little bit too low still. Well, that brings us near to the end of today's session, everyone. In the meantime, can't see any comments there. I don't know if no discussion at all today. I don't know if maybe it's just less people, or maybe you're still getting your heads around the Abhidharma content. I know there's a lot of material. As I said, next week we'll be looking into the different classifications, what are called universal states of mind, different mental phenomena that are present in every cognitive act, wholesome states, unwholesome states, afflictive states, and secondary afflictions, and trying to then be able to classify and be aware, so that when we recognize within ourselves certain states, we know whether they're ones that we need to develop, ones that we need to avoid, or ones that are always going to be present in some way or another. Okay, let's wrap up with our dedication of merit, shall we? So we'll join our palms and recite together. I go to the Buddha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall realize the great path and aspire to the supreme state of mind. I go to the Dharma for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall deeply enter the collection of teachings and attain wisdom like the ocean. I go to the Sangha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall unite and lead the community in harmony without any hindrance. So thank you everyone for joining me today for the class. We'll be back again next week with class 8 of this Buddhist psychology series. It may be the last. We'll again have to see as I reschedule things. But definitely next week we will be back. So I hope to see you all then. Okay, take care.